Watch this vidcast, or I'll gouge your eyes out.
Welcome back, horror hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show Podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I am James Rivera. We're going to get started with
Horror Show News.
It Chapter 2 opens up this weekend.
Oh yeah, and also Satanic Panic opens in limited release and in VOD.
Kyle Richards to return as Lindsay Wallace for Halloween Kills.
Midsommar Director's Cut comes exclusively to Apple TV.
The Black Christmas trailer drops. So, It Chapter 2 opens up this weekend. Mike and I already saw it. We have a big topic today, so we're going to discuss that next week. So, you'll have to tune into next week when for us to give our thoughts on that.
Yeah, because we're pretty sure most of you guys are out seeing it right now, so you don't need to hear us talk about it. So, we'll discuss it next week with all of you.
It is Fandango's best-selling horror movie, and according to Fandango, the most anticipated title of the fall.
Yeah, it looks like this one's going to be another huge one like the first one.
We saw it at a damn near sold-out theater, pretty packed audience. The only row that wasn't filled was the front row, and that's about it.
Yeah, and this was a Thursday evening, too.
And if that's any indication, we have another blockbuster on our hands like we did with the first one.
Yeah, we've seen it in a large theater, too. So.
And the audience seemed pretty receptive to it.
Yeah, everybody liked it, clapped at the end. But we'll discuss more details next week. Satanic Panic opens up this weekend. Unfortunately, limited run, so look
in
up
less than 20 theaters.
Yeah, so whatever city you're in, check out Satanic Panic at your local theater. And if you cannot find it anywhere in the theater, then check it out on VOD. I'm telling you, you must see this horror comedy. It's another great 2019 horror film, one of the best of the year.
Kyle Richards to return as Lindsay Wallace for Halloween Kills. So, if everybody remembers little Lindsay Wallace, she was with Tommy Doyle being babysat by Jamie Lee Curtis in the original Halloween by Laurie Strode. So, she's going to be returning. Last week, we announced that Tommy Doyle is going to be returning, but it's going to be played by Anthony Michael Hall this time. So, this time, they're actually getting the original actress. And on another note, Robert Longstreet will be reprising the role of Lonnie Lamb, and he was the bully in the original Halloween that was always picking on Tommy.
Yeah.
The one that Dr. Loomis says, "Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there."
They're really making an effort to make this a worthy trilogy.
You could tell by the fact that they're bringing back so many people. So it seems like they keep rolling out the announcements of who's returning very slowly. I also heard that Sheriff Brackett might be returning too.
Yeah.
But I think that's only a rumor at this point.
Well, we're sure to report on it if it's ever confirmed.
Yes. So look out for more news on Halloween Kills. We'll keep you updated all the way until its release.
One thing I'm excited about is the Midsommar Director's Cut, but not so excited that it's coming exclusively to Apple TV because I don't have Apple TV. iTunes Store says, your purchase of Midsommar comes with Ari Aster's extended and unrated director's cut, plus go behind the scenes with the cast and crew of Midsommar in an exclusive featurette, and watch the creation of Helsingland in time-lapse footage of the elaborate and meticulous set construction. This director's cut is available September 24th.
It annoys me. I actually used to have an Apple TV.
Yeah.
And I switched to Amazon Fire Stick. And I wish I still had that Apple TV now, so I'm going to have to... We'll find a way to watch it somehow. I think that's kind of bullshit that this is the only way to see it, but...
Yeah, there's got to be some kind of hard copy Blu-ray or something come out of this. Maybe it's exclusive to Apple TV for a run, and then it'll become available on Blu-ray after that. I don't know.
September 24th is also when you're going to be able to see the regular theatrical cut of Midsommar. You'll be able to rent that from Video On Demand on September 24th, and it becomes available on DVD and Blu-ray in the U.S. Keep in mind, in the U.S. on October 8th. Hopefully, some point in the future, they'll announce the sale of the director's cut.
Yeah. I was stoked when I seen it was coming out, and then I see exclusive to Apple TV. What the hell?
One thing that I'm also really excited for is, surprisingly, I'm excited for this. The Black Christmas trailer has dropped. And this is the second remake of Black Christmas. So the first remake I wasn't so crazy about. I love the original Black Christmas, but this one is being done by Blumhouse, a studio with a really great track record on horror. And we are actually about to watch the trailer right now, live on the podcast.
And it's going to play a commercial again. Alrighty then. And here we go.
It's my privilege to teach you this semester. Enjoy your winter breaks and Merry Christmas. Some ladies.
Carrie Elwes.
It is our last day.
Imogen
of our
Poots.
last fall semester of college ever.
Universal Studios and Blumhouse present.
More cute college girls.
I love Christmas horror movies. They strangely get me really excited for the Christmas season.
Yes.
Or,
And there seems to be a never-ending supply of them. And there's a lot of good ones too.
ooh, this girl is being followed around.
Come on, live a little.
The hell? Oh, wow. So the killer has just grabbed an ice pick. And the killer actually has a look. Reminds me a little bit of Ghostface.
It was an icicle, actually.
Oh, an icicle. He just looked like an ice pick. I'm thinking of Elliot.
Yeah.
From the producers of Get Out and Halloween.
Still creating problems, huh?
That's actually pretty original, I have to
There's
say.
some-
I've never seen an icicle being used to stab somebody.
So there's a satanic cult on this Black Christmas.
So that sounds like a radical reimagining of the material.
Yeah.
And the fact is, this killer has a look. You can actually see it. It reminds me a lot of Ghostface. Almost like they're trying to make it another Michael Myers or a Ghostface or a Jason.
Yeah, this is quite focused on the killer.
There's someone in the house.
On December
13th.
13th. Why are Christmas horror movies always nastier?
I know.
They just attacked him and got him on the ground. And they took his mask off and it's a statue. What the fuck?
And when they fought back against the killer, he turned out to be a statue when they took his hood off.
Many sacrifices have been made.
Sacrifices?
She's alive.
More satanic horror.
Yeah, looks supernatural.
Sisters. Never
I'm tired of hiding.
stand
Tired of running.
down. Girl power in this one.
It looks like much more of a survival movie.
Looks like these girls are ready to kick ass and fight back. Black Christmas. This Friday the 13th. Friday,
Yeah.
December 13th. You know, I didn't really think that we needed a Black Christmas remake, but these days you never know how good a movie's going to be, so I was willing to give it a chance. I actually like this trailer. I like that
Yeah.
it seems like it's a reinvention of it,
Yeah.
as opposed to just ripping it off and doing it all over again. A lot of the times the best remakes are ones that reimagine the material in a fresh way.
It's definitely not my Black Christmas, but it does look good. And I do understand, first of all, they need the name for marketability, but I also see why, he's in the house, someone's in the house with us, so that's kind of similar to Black Christmas. But besides that, they're going wildly in another direction, making it a survival film,
Satanic cult film,
a
too.
satanic cult, and they had some supernatural elements.
And I like the fact that the killer has a look this time.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's a different approach, because what's interesting about the original Black Christmas is you don't really glimpse the killer very much.
Yeah.
But you see his point of view a lot. You see his point of view more than you actually see the killer.
Yeah. And I would rather it be something more like that, but I guess that preserves the uniqueness of the original, and this one's doing something different. And it does look wildly better than the first remake.
I did like the score for the Black Christmas remake for the first one that came back in 06. Other than that, I really didn't like it, but I was a fan of that score. It could have been used in a better movie.
Yeah, I don't remember the score because I watched it once and I put it out of my mind.
What makes it interesting and what makes it look good is the approach they're taking. Like we said earlier, it's a remake that reimagines the material.
Yeah.
But remakes could be good whether or not they reimagine the material or whether they're more faithful
Yeah.
to the original. It just depends on the execution. On that note, we are going to segue into the topic of the week. Mike and I will be listing off our top 10 horror remakes.
Horror show exclusive.
When we say remakes, there are a few on my list anyway that are definitely technically not remakes. But we're talking about any remakes, reboots, anything that's been done once already, even if it's even if the remake has been done from the source material.
If it's been done as a film or a television or a TV series, if it's been done with actors and filmmaking and live action, we're counting it as a remake. However, we're not doing reboots, so something like Halloween 2018 is not going to make it because it doesn't erase the original film. It follows the continuity.
Yeah, it's technically a sequel as well, so.
It's a reboot and a sequel, so not all reboots are remakes. So for the purposes of our list, everything that we have is going to be something that's already been done on film before and some stuff that actually erases the original film.
Yeah.
Perfect. And we're actually going to get started with our honorable mentions.
Yeah, I have 10 of them. How many do you have?
I only have 6. And really quick, I apologize to our listeners. I have very bad allergies right now, and I've been getting a little sick lately. So if you hear me sniffling a little bit or if my voice isn't the best, I'm trying. I showed up for the podcast. I'm here.
He's not dipping his face in a pile of Coke or anything.
Oh yeah, so don't get the wrong idea. So what are your honorable mentions?
These are somewhat in order, but not completely. My honorable mentions aren't. Okay, the first one is Silent House with Elizabeth Olsen.
Silent House, what year is that from?
2011. I'm not sure what year the original was, but I think it was a French film. But the concept is one shot through the entire movie. There's no cutaways.
I don't think I've ever actually seen that.
Really good. I haven't seen the original, but it's definitely a good remake. And then Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a remake of the original 1956 film.
That's the 1978 version, correct?
Yes, this is 1978, starring Donald Sutherland. I'm currently in the middle of watching it again. I watched half of it the other night late, and then I stopped it so I could finish the rest, and I didn't get a chance to, but I did see it long ago, and it did jog my memory how good it was. Excellent movie. The next remake is Village of the Damned from 1995.
That's actually a really good one.
Yes, John Carpenter. Love that remake, but it didn't make my top 10. And neither did The Grudge from 2004.
I've never been a fan of The Grudge from 2004, to be honest with you, so it didn't make my honorable mentions or anything.
And actually, there's another Grudge coming up.
Oh, yes.
So that one could replace that one.
Hopefully, because the director is director of The Eyes of My Mother.
Yes.
And it's being produced by Ghost House, Sam Raimi's production.
The next one is a guy who loves to do remakes, and he does them well. Piranha 3D from Alexander Aja from 2010.
Oh, yeah.
Just over the top, silly, bloody.
That didn't make my list or my honorable mentions, but that's okay.
And this one, I can't believe it's in my honorable mentions. Part of it is probably because it's been a long time since I've seen it. Nosferatu the Vampire, 1979. And a slightly higher on the honorable mentions list is Dracula, 1992, Bram Stoker's with the great Gary Oldman.
So you have Dracula's in honorable mentions.
Yes. Another superior remake, which is actually better than the original, it almost made it into my top 10, was I Spit on Your Grave from 2010.
I completely forgot about that one.
Yeah.
That's about to make my honorable mentions.
Where the first one was
cheating
gritty, yeah. Where the first one was gritty and grindhouse, and this one is still gritty, but it had a polish on it that...
I thought it was pretty effective. I think it got under my skin,
yeah.
But it was supposed to get under my skin, so I get that. Wasn't the most enjoyable of experiences, but it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah.
Especially if you're into more hardcore horror.
And I think it being polished made it more hardcore because it brought it right into your face. You know, there's no like 70s grindhouse aesthetic.
Yeah, kind of removes
to hide
that
behind.
into
You
it,
know?
yeah.
The next one's not really a horror film, but it does have some horror scenes in it. Cape Fear, 1991.
The great Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, Robert De Niro.
And Juliette Lewis.
Jessica Lange, Juliette Lewis.
Nick Nolte.
Yeah.
Yes, that's actually a really good cast right there.
Yeah. And
actually, all four of those are superb. All four of them are superb actors.
Yeah. And some of the scariest scenes for me are between Robert De Niro and Juliette Lewis. And my last honorable mention came right up to the top 10, but didn't make it. The Ring from 2002.
The Ring
remake of Ringu.
So I'm going to go through my honorable mentions. I'm going to cheat really quick because I forgot one. But it's okay because I know it wouldn't have made my top 10 anyways. I Spit on Your Grave, which you just mentioned.
Okay.
So, sorry, cheating. The other one is The Crazies from 2010, directed by Breck Eisner. The remake of the George Romero one. I did. I thought it was
hated it.
appropriately brutal. I enjoyed it. It's not as good as the original one, don't get me wrong. It kind of seeps some of the social satire that George Romero was good at.
Yeah.
But just for me as a brutal experience, I found it pretty enjoyable. My number 15 film is I Am Legend from 2007, directed by Francis Lawrence, starring Will Smith. About the last man on Earth. It was actually a big blockbuster when it came out.
Yeah.
It was a really good zombie movie based on a classic novel. Again, it's more of an new adaptation of the novel than it is a remake, but I still count that as part of my list, as I told you earlier.
That's actually one of my favorite movies.
Really?
I Am Legend.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good movie.
Saw it so many times already.
My other honorable mention is The Hitcher from 2007. Not as good as the original, but a very faithful remake, and I think that's one that's really well worth seeking out. Of course, the original is the one with Rutger Hauer. I really like that one.
Yeah.
These are in order, by the way, except for I Spit on Your Grave, just because I'm not going to start figuring that out right now.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's in order. Next up on my list of honorable mentions is The Last House on the Left from 2009, directed by Dennis Iliadis. I actually really enjoyed this film, and I was actually kind of surprised it didn't make my top 10 horror remakes. And there's a bit of a debate within the film community about if it's better than the original, where obviously the original one has more historic importance to the horror genre than the remake does. But the remake is arguably better. Having said that, I still have a preference for the original because I really do like the 1970s grindhouse aesthetic that makes it seem kind of dirty. I like that dirty cheapness of the 1970s where there's just enough that I prefer it to the remake.
Yeah.
But I could see why certain people would actually prefer The Last House on the Left remake. So that's I really like that one. Next up on my list is probably going to piss Michael off. Is House on Haunted Hill from 1999.
Oh, another one
I really like that one. It's totally cheesy and it's kind of dated, but I honestly think that movie is a blast, and every time I watch it, I get a kick out of it. I recognize its cheesiness and it's not the best movie, but it reminds me a lot of childhood.
Yeah.
I grew up on it, so it's kind of a personal nostalgic choice for me. And next up, just outside of my top 10, is Maniac from 2012. Directed by Frank Calhoun, and this one is starring Elijah Wood.
Yeah.
I still prefer the original, but I really like the remake. Actually, I take that back. Like isn't really a good word that I would use to describe it, but I respect it a lot as a film, and I think it deserves a high ranking on any list of horror remakes. It's one of those ones that's so effective that it's kind of an unpleasant experience, but it really does what it sets out to do really well. And on that level, it's a very good horror film.
Yeah, I recognize it as a good film, but I don't like it because I don't like the way it makes me feel.
And that's a fair enough, because I don't like the way it makes me feel either, but it does it so damn well.
Yeah,
that
and Elijah Wood is so creepy in it, dude.
That I feel it must be acknowledged. So those are my list of honorable mentions. Let's get started with your 10, Michael.
You're listening to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
My number 10 is one that I'm aware that James does not like.
I know what this is.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003.
Blech.
I love it. It's brutal. The performances are good.
I like Arlie Ermy.
Yeah.
I do like Arlie Ermy. I always love me some Ermy.
It feels dangerous. I like the changes that they made from the original. I thought it was exciting. It was directed by Marcus Nispel. And thanks to me liking this one, I forgive him for Friday the 13th, 2009, which is one of the worst remakes I've ever seen.
You know, that's one of the worst remakes where I might agree with you, but it has fantastic kills for such a shitty movie.
Yeah,
Some of the
definitely.
kills are so memorable. I'm like, why couldn't this be in a better film? So
Yeah,
I have mixed feelings about that one, because on the one hand, it's not good, but the kill scenes are very, very effective and very convincing and very visceral. It's just everything in between that is shit.
Yeah.
And most of the movie is build-up. It's not kills. So it's not enough.
They have a feature on the Friday the 13th Blu-ray where you can, I believe it's 7 kills, where you can watch all 7 kills back to back, and it's pretty entertaining. Not only because Derek Mears is an excellent Jason, but the kills are really solid and pretty brutal.
All right, so...
But this one has definitely got a lot of brutal kills,
It's
And
just
this
too slick for me because I don't know. It doesn't capture that Texas Chainsaw Massacre feel. And I might have a little bit of a bias for it, to be quite honest. I might have a little bit of a bias against it, where I recognize why a lot of people would like it because it's gory and it's slick, but there's something about it that's a little too slick for my taste.
yeah.
Almost too clean. But Ermi, like I said, is a big standout in that one for me.
Well, I admit you can kind of tell that the director he did a lot of music videos.
I don't like that kind of vaguely monochromatic look, and that's another personal bias of mine. I don't like movies where the aesthetic is monochromatic.
Yeah.
Like that. I think it's kind of unpleasant on the eyes, for one thing. I've never liked that aesthetic choice, and when movies look like that, it kind of turns me away a little bit.
Yeah,
It puts a weird...
It usually turns me off, but it kind of fits this one because that's kind of the color of their surroundings, kind of that desert, hot Texas.
But could you agree with me
feel to
that it doesn't, even if you like it, you could agree with me that it doesn't touch the dirty grittiness of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I like I said, I like the changes that they made. And the writer is Scott Kozar. He wrote The Machinist. He wrote a terrible remake, The Amityville Horror, and another remake I didn't like, The Crazies. But he did...
That's on my honorable mentions.
Yeah. But he did 3 episodes of Bates Motel, which was an excellent show, and he actually did an episode of Haunting of Hill House.
Oh.
So I had a good writer on it. Jessica Biel was awesome in it, and she looked super hot. Arlie Ermy, like you mentioned, and I loved it.
Yeah, I would never take anything away from his... He's the best thing about the movie for me.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to have seen him in more horror movies being intimidating like that, actually. I think
yeah.
it's a damn shame that he didn't appear in more.
And in the scene where with Arlie Ermy and Jonathan Tucker, where the guy has the gun in his mouth,
mm-hmm.
the guy actually forced the gun into his mouth until he puked on every take. So, and that's
dedication. I have to admit, that's dedication.
That's one of the
right
examples of why I like this film, because all the cast really dedicates to it. They dedicate to the drama of it, and they dedicate to the horror of it.
Yeah.
And I love that John Larroquette returns as the narrator. It had a $9.5 million budget, which it looks like it has more of a budget than that. It's pretty brutal and also kind of slick, which you don't like about it, but I like that. And also, I love that it has the same cinematographer from the original, Daniel Pearl.
Wait, it does?
Yeah.
How come I've never known this? I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
I feel kind of dumb now. Then why... Okay, that makes me question this even more.
Yeah.
The original cinematographer worked on this, and he couldn't get something better than that nasty monochrome. I'm just kidding.
I like the changes to the family, even though the hitchhiker was a woman who kills herself rather than how it plays out in the original. And there's no famous dinner scene or anything like that.
Which is probably one of the best things about the original. But you can't really... I'll give them credit. They didn't try to recreate something they know they could never recreate.
Yeah. So I like how they altered it and how they make Arlie Ermy like the main villain.
Instead of Leatherface.
Yeah.
So we're going to kick off my list now. My number 10 is The Hills Have Eyes from 2006, directed by Alexander Aja.
Oh, that's pretty low.
It is, I guess. Having said that, I have to say, this is the case. I prefer the remake of The Hills Have Eyes to the Wes Craven original. I like the Wes Craven original, and like I said, it's like The Last House on the Left, it's probably more historically important to the horror genre than the remake is. Having said that, the original did not hit me the way that the remake did. I think the remake is a lot more visceral, it's more brutal, it's a little bit scarier, it's freakier, it puts you on edge more, and it's one of those cases where the polish actually elevates the material for me. This is one of those rare cases where I think the remake actually trumps the original in terms of quality and filmmaking. And of course, I love Alexander Aja. I think he's a fantastic filmmaker, and it's no surprise. He just did High Tension, or Hot Tension, depending on where you're at, or Switchblade Romance. It has different titles internationally. That's one of my favorite French horror movies, and I love the extremity of it. I love the brutality of it. And that almost made him a perfect director for this material, like the perfect director to remake that specific film. It's perfect for him because it fits his sensibility so well, and he knows how to pull it off really well. And the little girl in the Hills Have Eyes remake is freakier than anything in the original remake, in my opinion.
Yeah, all the mutants in general are well designed and scary.
And it comes at you fast, and it hits you really hard when you watch it. That's one of the things that I always dug about it, and it's one of the reasons I prefer it to the original. With no disrespect, I love Wes Craven, but this material was much better for me in Alexander Aja's hands.
Yeah, it captures the feeling of the original and elevates it.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why it's such a great remake, is because it's very faithful in terms of the feel and the style, but it takes it a step further.
Yeah.
And for me, that puts it at number 10 on my list.
All right, and that brings us to my number 9.
Let's hear it.
It's House of Wax from 2005. The original was the 1953 Vincent Price film. And this has no similarities to the Vincent Price film besides the name and the wax museum setting. And it's actually more similar to Tourist Trap than it is the original House of Wax, if you think about it.
But House of Wax is a little bit more iconic. It's something you could bank off a little bit more
Yeah.
than Tourist Trap.
It's an excellent Spanish director, Jaume Collet Serra. He did The Orphan and The Shallows, both movies that I don't like The Shallows quite as much as I do The Orphan.
The Orphan's a really good movie, though.
But that's excellent, and The Shallows is really good, but it benefits from being one of the few really solid shark movies because there's surprisingly few of them. Mm-hmm. And the writers are actually Chad and Carrie Hayes, the writers of The Conjuring 1 and 2.
Oh, no wonder you like it so much.
Yeah. So there's something about their style that feels genuine to me, and I like their characters and I like the dialogue.
The best thing about this movie for me is the fact that we get to see Paris Hilton slaughtered.
Oh yeah, and
I'm just kidding. I don't want to sound mean.
I love the tagline of the tagline of the movie is "On May 6th, see Paris die."
Oh my lord!
Even the marketing.
Oh, the marketing was capitalizing on her trashy tabloid image that she had going for a while. There's actually good in that movie, though. She does deliver a solid performance. She doesn't turn in or she doesn't show up and embarrass herself or anything. Like, well, you made yourself look like you belong there, so credit must be given there.
She's really good, and her kill is really satisfying.
Yes.
Alicia,
and I'm pretty sure that was the marketing. Go see Paris Hilton get slaughtered.
Yeah. Alicia Cuthbert was really good in it. And Jared Padalecki, who actually just waded through that piece of shit of a Friday the 13th remake, actually made this one pretty good. Mm-hmm. It had a $40 million budget, but it only made $68 million worldwide. So it was a bit of a flop, but not as bad. I'm sure it was a little more successful than they imagined. I'm sure that a lot of that $40 million budget went to the wax museum. Because it was constructed, the entire town was constructed in 10 weeks. It was while they were building it, an entire WB soundstage was burned down. And it was kind of ironic that a candle fell over and burnt down a wax
figure.
Yeah, a wax
house
soundstage. Yeah. So I think that's a really solid and underrated remake.
So my number 9 is bound to piss Michael off. Is the Evil Dead remake from 2013, directed by Fede Alvarez.
Didn't even make my honorable mentions.
Oh, I know. I really like this movie a lot. The Evil Dead is actually, we discussed this before, that's probably it is my favorite horror franchise overall, if you count the original trilogy and the series Ash vs. Evil Dead. And for me, if you even count the remake as just a little bit of extra thing, I'm not comparing it to the original.
Yeah.
But I actually really like this one a lot. I get what Michael's complaints are about it, and he'll probably tell you himself in a moment. But what I really liked about it is that it was exactly what I expected it to be in terms of the gore and the violence that was in it. It was almost what I tried to, when I went to go see it, I was imagining what an Evil Dead movie would look like now, and it kind of fit exactly what I thought it would be like. It kind of really fulfilled my expectations. It does drain the humor out of it, so I can understand why some Evil Dead fans don't like that, but I kind of like that because it gives it a different take that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I will never compare the Evil Dead remake to the original Evil Dead, which is one of my top 3 favorite horror movies of all time.
Shut up.
And Michael, I know Michael's going to disagree with me. I actually think the reason for them being at the cabin is a little bit more believable that they would stay there after so long, because in this one the main character Mia is coming off of heroin. Her friends bring her there to detox, and if you've ever been around people who are coming off of this drug or coming off of anything, they can sometimes hallucinate and they go crazy and they start saying wild, bizarre things, or they'll say anything just to get out of there. So it makes sense to me that they would stay longer when she starts talking about seeing demons and seeing all that, because I would take it as she's just coming off of heroin. She needs to stay where she's at. It's kind of like a tough love type of thing.
Yeah.
But I really just enjoy the gore, the brutality of it. It was exactly what I wanted out of it. It was fun for me. It was kind of exciting. I love the bloodbath. I love the monster. I liked Mia as a character. Don't get me wrong, Mia is no Ash. I just have to really remind the audience that Mia is no Ash. But I still loved it anyway. For me, it's one of the better horror remakes. It's one that's really satisfied my expectations. And it showed to me how talented Fede Alvarez was. And I think he expands that talent even more on his follow-up movie, Don't Breathe, which is something original. Yeah. But I could already see some of that talent right there. He has a very visceral quality. He knows how to film things very well. He knows how to frame it. And he shoots really good gore scenes. And I liked it because it wasn't too much CGI either. There was a little CGI at the end to create the monster that they do, but most of it looks pretty realistic, I think anyway. A lot of the gore scenes actually look realistic. And of course, how could you not love the tongue-splitting thing, just seeing Mia take her tongue, lick a razor very sexually, and you just have her tongue split apart while kissing another girl. Oh man, I thought that was a phenomenal scene. I also love the bathroom scene.
That was the best scene in the movie right there. That was
teacher,
scary.
That scared the fuck out of me the first time I saw it. Even though I was expecting something over the top and brutal, when I finally saw it, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And then the way that the character keeps stabbing the guy with the needle and then it gets in his eye, that made me cringe. I felt myself ball up a little bit. And it was so satisfying when he finally took the toilet seat and started bashing her head in. Like, very visceral movie. And it left a good impression on me, and it's exactly what I expected out of an Evil Dead remake.
And he was actually the only character I cared about, which is one of the reasons why I like that bathroom scene.
You know, he actually reminds me, the way he looks with his hair and everything, of what you used to look like when I first met you, Michael.
Oh, yeah?
He has that kind of look.
Yeah.
The Evil Dead remake by Fede Alvarez is my number 9. And Michael, I want to hear, I know you have some counter arguments, so let's hear them.
You mentioned the look of it, and that's one of the things I really like about it.
You just think it's well filmed.
I like the look of it, and I like the premise of it. With the premise of it, I thought that they would take that seriousness and that drama and really make this heart-wrenching and feel like these are friends and a brother and sister and their friends that are going to this cabin for a very good reason to get this girl off drugs. So I thought it should have been more authentic, more dramatic, instead of not believing that any of these people were friends and not believing that they were brother and sister.
Okay, that is one thing that I do have a couple of complaints about the movie, because it's not perfect. I just think it's a good remake. I don't find the relationship between the brother and sister believable, and I actually have a hard time believing that they're brother and sister.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that guy is there only to be eye candy. And they don't look related, actually. They don't even look like they're biologically related. Yeah. Is another thing for me. So I didn't buy the relationship either. It wasn't enough to kill me, but I can definitely see that as a very, very valid criticism. You know who I did like, though? The brother's girlfriend.
Yeah.
I really liked it where she had to actually cut her arm off. I love that scene, and when she's walking over to him, that's probably the closest the movie ever comes to tipping any kind of slapstick gore.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't feel good, and you see her all ripped up and falling apart. That kind of got a giggle out of me.
My number 8 is probably going to piss you off.
Okay, is it really?
Carrie from 2013.
I don't hate it, to be honest. I'm not, but go on. I'll explain a little bit more of my feelings about it after.
So, while it didn't capture the cinematic splendor of the original, I thought it captured the emotional impact. Mm-hmm. And I actually thought the Carrie remake was more heartbreaking to me than the first one was. I felt her plight. I didn't get
that at all.
I felt her plight more in this one than the first one.
Oh, I can't agree with that. Sissy Spacek really broke my heart because she seems so fragile and everything. Chloe Grace Moretz, and like I said, I don't dislike this movie and I wouldn't even call it bad. It's just that Chloe Grace Moretz actually delivers a very good performance because she's a talented actress. However, I just have a hard time buying or believing somebody that beautiful would be that ostracized or would be... I mean, I could be wrong, but
One thing is she did have quite a bit of problems with bullies, and that's why she connected with this role. She did have problems with bullies, and she was actually 15 when she made it, while Sissy Spacek was 26 when she made Carrie.
But Sissy Spacek still looks pretty young, even though she was 26.
She did look young and innocent, yeah.
And I think it's just that for some reason, despite a really good performance, I don't know, and this is not to actually even say that Sissy Spacek isn't beautiful, because I actually think she's very beautiful, but she's beautiful in a way that's kind of not typical, or it's more alien and foreign, where I could see kids picking on that. Like the Chloe Grace Moretz and Carrie, any guy would have been happy or would have been excited to take that girl to the prom with them. Anybody would have showed up excited to have somebody that beautiful attend the prom with them. And I actually think the prom scene is kind of effective, but it completely drains the magic and the poetry out of the original for me. The original one had a poetry to it. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. It doesn't have that splendor, that cinematic magic that I get off of the original one.
Well, I believe the bullying and stuff, and I believe that this girl was an outcast at school because I grew up in a small town. And in a small town, I was in class with a couple very good-looking guys and a couple very good-looking girls who were outcasts because their parents didn't have money. Mm-hmm. So everybody treated them like a piece of shit. So I always thought that was confusing to me because I always thought that good-looking people got treated better than the ugly people. But I've witnessed some good-looking people but get treated like shit just because they were poor, or they have a crazy mom who's a religious fanatic.
and that's another of my issues with it is Julianne Moore is she's a great actress. She plays the role almost too serious for my taste. Where the original one, where Piper Laurie is a little bit campy as Carrie's mom.
Yeah.
But she's so dementedly campy that she's a believable monster. Even as you laugh at her, you believe that this woman is this believably insane.
Yeah.
This one is not as fun or memorable of a performance because it takes it a little bit too seriously, where I'm like, it's good and all, but it doesn't pop off the screen the way the original did for me.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about, the emotional impact. The emotional impact was there. I felt it a little more because it was more of a realistic situation. Mm-hmm. And she was still a crazy religious wacko. Yeah,
she was a crazy religious wacko. But you know what I mean? Because Julianne Moore, the type of actress that she is, I could tell she was going for a more realistic portrayal.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not as memorable. And just for me personally, that's one of the most memorable horror movie villains.
Yeah.
In the original, just because she's so believably over the top and everything, even though it's campier, it just doesn't have that same pop to it that the original has for me.
And this one also had great performances across the board from Chloe.
Ansel Elgort's in it, right?
Yeah.
He's good.
Chloe Moretz, Julianne Moore, Portia Doubleday from Mr. Robot was really good in it.
Yeah, she was actually.
Judy Greer was really good in it.
I actually really like Judy Greer. That's a performance I appreciated in that one.
And Judy Greer's character in Jawbreaker was actually based on Sissy Spacek's Carrie.
Do you think that's why she was chosen for this?
Probably, I bet.
Like a little bit of an homage?
Yeah. And, also Ansel Elgort, and it was actually his first movie.
He's actually really good in that.
Yeah.
And he's believable as the popular high school kid. In the same way that Tommy Ross looks like he would be a popular kid in high school, but in the 70s. His look is so 70s in the original one.
Yeah.
And the new Tommy Ross updates him believably what a popular millennial would look like. He has more of that look.
Yeah.
So I think he was pretty good in it too.
And while she's no Brian De Palma, Kimberly Pierce is a really strong director. She did Boys Don't Cry,
which I love. I really like that a lot.
She did a couple episodes of The L Word and 2 episodes of Dear White People.
That's another thing that I kind of was disappointed about it, because I really liked Boys Don't Cry a lot. I thought it was interesting that director was taking on Carrie. I expected something a little bit more out of it than I got. It was a little bit more traditional than I thought it was going to be. I thought, oh, the Boys Don't Cry director is taking on that material.
Yeah.
I was eager, so I guess that's another thing that kind of let me down a little bit. I expected something a little bit more unique from that director.
Well, it's definitely not without its problems. Chloe Moretz didn't actually see the original before she portrayed it. I think it would have helped her performance if she would have seen the original. She
think so?
Probably would have avoided the stuff at the prom. The stuff where all the hand gestures and stuff, that just didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for that scene would have been more cinematic, I think. And I think it would have been more effective if she hadn't done the hand gestures. To me, it's a little bit better just to see Spacek, the cold, hard look on her face. Like, you could read it on her face, the anguish and the pain that she's feeling inside. Yeah.
The rage that she carries in her, that she's always pushed down. You could really see it bubble to the surface just with facial expressions. Chloe Grace Moretz's portrayal with the hand movements almost made it seem like a superhero origin story.
I mentioned the emotional impact of it, and there was a couple scenes that kind of killed the emotional impact, and part of it was the hand gestures, and the other one was the part with her mom with the broken mirror. They tried to do that effect with wires, and the director just didn't like the look of it, so they ended up going with CGI.
Yeah.
Kind of takes you out of it a little bit, kind of a little too sensationalist for the emotional depth that I thought it had. I thought that put a little cheesy edge to it. But it had good writers on it as well. Lawrence D. Cohen was one of the writers, and he wrote actually the original, and he wrote the first part of the It miniseries.
From 1990?
Yeah, the best part. And he also wrote Tommyknockers. And it was co-written by...
So he's very familiar with adapting Stephen King.
Yeah. And his fellow writer was Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa. He wrote
Aguirre or Aguirre?
It might be Aguirre. Yeah.
Aguirre.
Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa.
Roberto Aguirre. Yeah, that sounds better.
And he wrote Town That Dreaded Sundown, and he wrote the show Big Love. He wrote a few episodes of that. Wrote Glee, Riverdale, and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. But Carrie 2013, I thought it was a really solid movie with some flaws, and not as good as the original, but I thought it was an excellent movie.
Bear in mind, Carrie is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, one of my favorite movies. Not horror movies, just movies, period.
Yeah.
There's the way that I love that movie, there's no way that anything was ever going to live up to that for me.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind when I share my opinion. Well, my number 8 is actually Cape Fear from 1991, directed by the great Martin Scorsese.
Nice.
And starring Robert De Niro as Max Cady in a fantastic performance. One of Robert De Niro's best performances. I just love this one because I can see how some people would classify this more as a thriller than a horror movie. But to me, it has just enough horror elements to keep it a horror film. If you've ever seen the original, Robert Mitchum plays Max Cady.
Yeah.
He's actually really good in the original. I actually like the original one a lot. I'd have to think about which one is better, though I've probably seen the Cape Fear remake a lot more just because it's something I grew up on.
Yeah.
Robert De Niro is very frightening in this film. The psycho that he plays, the relentlessness that he has. And it's one of those great psycho performances that, had it not been for Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter, he would have deserved to have won Best Actor that year.
Yeah.
Having said that, I can't argue with that. It's a dessert. I can't argue with that. Anthony Hopkins is a little bit more iconic and a little bit more frightening, so I get why he gets the award. And of course, it's a bigger thing in pop culture than Cape Fear is.
Yeah.
But I really, one of my favorite scene, my favorite horror scene in the movie, is when Nick Nolte, who is actually being stalked by Max Cady, he's stalking his family. The movie is about a lawyer who had Max Cady as a client about 15 or 20 years ago, and he was a rapist and a very bad person. And he knew that he was guilty, so he was extra lazy in defending him because he didn't feel like he didn't feel like it was fair that somebody like that would be released back into the world knowing what he did. So he actually listened to his conscience, which is probably a mistake for a lawyer.
Yeah.
And Robert De Niro, who at the time, Max Cady, was actually illiterate. and didn't know anything about the law. So he spent 15 years in prison teaching himself to read, devouring books on law, and he came to the conclusion that he actually didn't represent him properly. So he comes after him and his family in the movie. And Jessica Lange is the wife, Jessica Lange before American Horror Story, and Juliette Lewis as their daughter. That's one of the best parts about the movie, is the dynamic between Robert De Niro and Juliette Lewis. Yeah. The way that he insinuates himself into her life, and the way that he takes advantage of her vulnerability. And, you know, the fact that she's an adolescent, she's growing up, and he's really smooth with her. But when he starts getting a little bit too close with her, it's really fucking gross and creepy, just because the nature of what it's suggesting. Yeah. And because you know that this guy has already raped and beaten a 15-year-old girl before. Yeah. So you already know what he's capable of. And another great scene is when he has Nick Nolte's his mistress. He seduces her, ties her up, and makes him think that they're going to play a sex game. Yeah. And then he just beats the fuck out of her and then bites a piece of her cheek off. And that was just like, damn, that was brutal. A
disturbing scene.
Really disturbing. Really effective, frightening horror thriller. And one of the few times that Martin Scorsese, who's a legend, one of my favorite filmmakers, ever dipped his toes into the horror genre. The other time is Shutter Island. Yeah. So it's nice to see Scorsese tackle that territory.
I love when Nick Nolte hires those guys to beat De Niro's ass.
And he just fucks them up.
He fucks them up, and then he's hiding behind the dumpster, and you think he's going to catch him, and he's like, "Counselor,
I know you're there." And then
I wonder if you're there.
So overall, I love Cape Fear, really standout or horror remake. Also, if the remake is actually, I think, more widely seen and more known than the original, I would recommend, if you have a chance, to check out the original Cape Fear from the 1950s, because I think that's a really good film too, and definitely worth checking out. Also, what I find interesting about this is, even though it's directed by Martin Scorsese, it doesn't employ his usual style or his bag of cinematic trick stuff that you see in Taxi Driver or Raging Bull or Goodfellas. It reminds me a little bit of almost like an updated Hitchcock film. Yeah. It even has a Bernard Herrmann score that I think they took from the original. The classical filming, the style, the way that it builds tension, it's very Hitchcockian, where you could see that was Scorsese's chance to make a Hitchcock-style film.
And it has a lot of iconic scenes for being a remake.
Yeah, it does.
Like De Niro hanging upside down, and
him underneath the car, which was parodied on Rick and Morty.
And Simpsons.
And The Simpsons.
Yeah, Sideshow Bob.
Oh man, actually, that's one of my favorite episodes of The Simpsons. Is when they did the Cape Fear parody. Yeah, that was a really good job of that. And it was funny. I actually rewatched that episode earlier this year. I hadn't seen it since I was really young, and I remembered it, but at the time I had never seen Cape Fear. So when I just all of a sudden was like, oh yeah, duh, that's Cape Fear. So it just kind of like a revelation in my head when I rewatched some of the old episodes of The Simpsons. So that's my number 8 film, Cape Fear.
Now we're down to my number 7, which is It, 2017.
Directed by the great Andy Muschietti.
Andy Muschietti, who directed Mama, and then shot...
Which I wasn't a fan of, though.
Yeah, I mean, Mama, it was good. I think it got to the third act.
And it completely fell apart. Yeah, CGI just had me giggling and busting up when I don't think it was meant to.
Exactly, but some of the CGI in It looks similar to Mama, but it's much more effective, much better done.
A little bit more subtle too.
Yeah. The writers on this was Chase Palmer, this was his first feature, and the co-writers were Cary Fukunaga and Gary Dauberman, who did the Annabelle movies and The Nun. And this is his crowning achievement. And
this is far better than Annabelle or The Nun.
Yeah, and all relative unknowns except for Finn Wolfhard, who was in Stranger Things, and Bill Skarsgård, who was only in Hemlock Grove, so he was somewhat known when he got the role of Pennywise. But this was a $35 million budget, and it actually looks bigger than that.
And it was a big blockbuster, the highest grossing horror movie of all time, unadjusted for inflation.
Yeah, $700 million worldwide.
I really liked it a lot, and I've always prefer it to the miniseries. Maybe we've talked about it on the podcast before. I like the first half of the miniseries, and I love Tim Curry. That's such a great portrayal of Pennywise. But overall, the remake is a stronger film for me. It's
Yeah,
just, it works so much better. The chemistry between the kids is better.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say Bill Skarsgård is better than Tim Curry. I think he's just about as good, but completely different. And the fact that he was managed to create a completely original interpretation, apart from such an iconic performance, and the way that he was able to stand out, speaks to his achievement with that performance.
Well, not only did Bill Skarsgård have big shoes to fill with Pennywise, the entire children cast had big shoes to fill, because that original cast of the miniseries was really good. The child
child actors. But I think the 2017 version outdid it.
Yeah.
And I think the kids were more endearing and more believably friends. And the acting was a little bit better. It was actually good acting for kids in the original, don't get me wrong, but these actors seemed a little bit more seasoned.
Yeah, and this felt very Stand By Me to me, as far as it felt
dynamic.
like a genuine connection between the characters.
And that's one of the things I love about it, because I love Stand By Me.
Yeah, and the emotion was effective in it. And now, as we've mentioned a couple times before, we saw an uncut version of this, a longer version, a more brutal version, and a more dramatic version. The theatrical version kind of messed with the dynamic between the kids.
They made it a little bit more audience friendly.
Yeah.
From the original cut that we saw.
So that one especially is superior.
But I don't know if we're ever going to see that, because it was at a test screening, and it's never been said that there's a director's cut or anything like that. So that version that we saw that one time may very well never see the light of day again.
Yeah. And 2017 thrust horror all the way into the mainstream and made horror blockbusters possible.
It made over $120 million on its opening weekend.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I'm sure a lot of great movies are going to come out of it, but I'm sure a lot of clunkers and a lot of cash grabs are going to follow this one. But an excellent movie, and a good follow-up that we've seen today that we'll tell you more about next week.
Yes.
But my number 7 is It 2017.
My number 7 is another horror blockbuster, is The Ring.
Okay.
Gore Verbinski. Before you see it, you die. I really liked it a lot when I saw it, and I feel like it's held up over the years. Especially the opening scene really still creeps me out, and it has a great jump scare when you kind of just see the closet open and you see that girl's face. I can't even describe what they do to the faces in this movie.
Yeah.
But the first time I saw that made my heart skip a beat, and I jumped back. I think it's a really scary film. It manages to be, I guess, more mainstream than Ringu, the Japanese version, without diluting it or making it feel cheap, or without making it feel like you're compromising the material. And what makes that even more impressive is that it's a PG-13 horror movie. And I don't think, it doesn't feel like a PG-13 horror movie when I watch it. It feels very sinister and very menacing.
Yeah, it's
so that's
one of the scariest of that rating.
Yeah, so it's up there with the best PG-13 horror movies, period. It's very cinematic. I think Naomi Watts is really good in this. I think Brian Cox is really good in this. And of course, Samara created a new horror icon for Samara. Nobody's ever going to forget that image of her coming out of the well as you're watching her on the TV, and then her crawling forward and just crawling out of the TV. Still effective to this day.
Yeah.
And I have some of the, and you know what, like the kill, not really kills. It's just a lot of terror, and then you see the aftermath of it, and that's kind of what I like about it. It makes it a little bit more effective. And I like the twist at the end, where they feel that they're saving Samara, or they feel like they're letting her loose because of all that she's been through. And the little boy tells him, "Why did you do that? She's evil." And by the end, they realize that little girl wasn't those type. You think it's a horror movie, like The Sixth Sense, where it's about a ghost who's been wrong and just needs to be put to rest. And you think that for a good majority of the runtime, and then you realize, no, that little girl was really fucking evil, and there was a reason that they kept her locked away.
Yeah. But I do think that as good as this one was, the original was still scarier.
Yeah.
Ringu.
That's because the Japanese have an eerier sensibility about it than Americans do. But as far as an American mainstream PG-13 film goes, this is one of the best.
All right, that brings us to my number 6.
And what is your number 6?
My number 6 is The Blob from 1988. I love this movie.
Really?
Ever since the first time I saw it.
So what do you love about the Blob remake?
It's directed by Chuck Russell, who had just directed Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And then he went on to direct movies like The Mask, which is wildly different. Jim Carrey's The Mask.
That's a really big... That's actually, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
I could actually see why the director of The Mask would make... Or that might be the same director.
And then wildly different from anything else he'd done was Eraser with...
Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Arnold, yeah.
Oh, man, I remember I went to go see that at the movie theaters when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was like 6 years old when that came out.
So awesome director, and then the writers were Theodore Simpson and Kay Uniker, who wrote the original, but that was an early draft, and one of the director's stipulations was if he was able to get a rewrite on it. So he had Frank, the director, did a rewrite on it with Frank Darabont.
I actually like the original more, and that might be a personal thing because that's something that my grandpa showed me when I was a little kid, was The Blob. And this was something that stood out, where the remake was a good film, but for me, it doesn't have that fun campiness of the original Blob from the 1950s. I really, one of my favorite 50s horror films, actually.
And this one introduced me to Shawnee Smith, who went on to be an iconic character from the Saw series. Shawnee Smith and Kevin Dillon in all his cheesy glory with his mullet and his leather jacket and motorcycle.
Yeah, that was pretty cheesy.
I just love the whole aesthetic of it. The whole, motorcycle riding, Kevin Dillon to the blob tearing through town and devouring people. It's like this alien blob organism that kind of just devours everything in its path. But the effects were really cool. The people stuck inside the blob, and as they kind of stretched out, trying to get out of the blob, kind of their skin peeling off and shit like that. So the effects were a big part of why this was great.
Don't you think this is one of the silliest premises in the history of horror films? Is the blob. Just a blob that comes out and gets you.
Yeah.
It's pretty goofy, but I think that's part of the fun of the blob.
Yeah, but I think it looks really good. It's very entertaining, fast-paced, and you can tell that it has a $19 million budget, and $9 million of it went to special effects. But sadly, it went on to only $8 million worldwide box office, so it didn't even make enough to pay for the special effects.
I guess the nostalgia factor wasn't big enough for that film to carry it to box office glory.
Yeah, and on a few movies, here on my list, I note what the budget was and what they made, and I noticed when I go through here that a lot of movies, you know how they say that remakes are cash grabs and nothing but a way for studio to make sure things that would make money.
Iconic properties that already exist.
Yeah, but
built-in audiences.
But that's not so true. Like, a lot of these have a lot of money sunk into them, and they didn't make a whole lot of money back, but they have found a life afterwards, though, because they were such good, solid remakes. So my number 6 was The Blob.
My number 6 is one that you just spoke about, is It. Andy Muschietti's It from 2017.
Okay.
And it's just because it's such a satisfying version of the Stephen King story. I love the Stand By Me vibe. I love all the child actors. I think they all have such great chemistry. They're all believable. They're funny. They're endearing. The movie is very creepy. It's very well shot, very well filmed. Bill Skarsgård is a fucking fantastic Pennywise. One of the things that I like about the new It is it took the most iconic scene from the original 1990 miniseries where Georgie gets pulled down to the sewer, and that's a really effective scene where Pennywise pulls him down. They did a good job the first time.
Yeah.
But they took an iconic scene that everybody knows, the yellow jacket, the boat going down the street and then falling into the sewer, Pennywise appearing where you could just see him enough talking to the kid. They took that scene and they topped it. They made it scarier. They made it more effective. The gore is a little, obviously they don't really show anything. You just know, because it's a miniseries. So in all fairness, the original one did not have the same freedom to take it as far because it was made for television, for regular television at that, not cable or anything like that. So they took that scene, they made it gorier and more frightening, and I think the most effective thing is seeing little Georgie crawling away across the street, trying to get away with his arm missing and crying in pain, which is actually really horrifying to see a child that damaged. And the way that the hand just reaches from the sewer and stretches out underneath him, that image right there is just fantastic. I just love that image. I think it's something that you could freeze as one of the great images ever captured in horror. Is a hand descending on the little kid. So it topped it in every way except maybe Pennywise, where I wouldn't say it topped it, it just equaled it. But it's everything that I wanted out of the original miniseries. It fulfilled the potential of that story that I always felt was there. Because even though I enjoy the first half of the miniseries, there's still something about it that feels like the story could have been done a little bit better. You could have made it a little bit more horrifying.
Yeah.
And I feel that Andy Muschietti's version lives up to the promise of what the story could be.
Well, they even toned down the Georgie scene from the original cut, and it's still pretty brutal and pretty scary.
Yeah.
Like the cut we seen, it showed a longer, lingering shot of the hand stretching all the way across, because on the shot we seen, Georgie was almost all the way across the road, dragging himself with his arm missing. And then you see the hand creep out, and it creeps all the way across the road, and it's long and excruciating. And then it shows him dragging him all the way across, and it drags him through a puddle of blood. And in this theatrical version, much of that blood was taken out.
And I imagine it's because to make it a little bit more mainstream, because a lot of people don't like to see children in danger or don't like to see children as victims in anything. So I imagine just to make it a little bit more bankable. Though I'm not sure if that should have made a difference because it's rated R anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever. Regardless, it still works really well, even though it's a little bit toned down.
If you notice, a lot of the parts where children get torn apart, it involves CGI, where Pennywise turns CGI right before it happens. I wonder if it's made like that to kind of take some of the sting out of it.
Probably. But yeah, that is my number 6. Andy Muschietti's it.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll rip your lips off.
All right, and now we're down to our top 5.
Ooh, this is where it's going to get really interesting.
And my number 5 is the legendary remake Cronenberg's The Fly from '86.
Fantastic choice, Mr. Michael.
It's based on the short story by George Langeland. And the writers are Cronenberg and Charles Edward Pogue, who wrote Psycho 3 and also DOA with Meg Ryan. Stars Jeff Goldblum, Gina
Wait, the
Davis.
remake of DOA?
Huh?
DOA, the remake?
Oh, is that a remake too?
Yeah, there's a 1950s film with Jimmy Stewart. That's the one who's about the man who's been poisoned, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually didn't know there was a remake of DOA until you told me that right now. The only one that I'm familiar with is the Jimmy Stewart film noir.
Okay, I didn't even realize it was a remake.
Yeah, that's something that my grandfather actually showed me as a child.
Okay.
Really good movie.
This is one of Gina Davis's iconic roles.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
And Cronenberg actually fought for Jeff Goldblum.
I find that kind of surprising because he's so magnetic in the movie.
Yeah, the studio didn't think he was a bankable enough star.
What? I love his acting in this movie because he's as a scientist, he's very believable. And when he starts to make his slow transformation into the Fly, it's very good physical acting, the way that he moves, the way that he contorts his body, the decrepitness, the way that he starts speaking. Of course, it's also a combination of the great gore makeup that they use in the movie. It helps to elevate the performance too. But even without that, Jeff Goldblum delivers for me one of the great acting performances in horror film history with The Fly.
And every stage of his makeup is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Much like in a different way, but in similar in Hellraiser, where it was these stages of makeup
that slowly progress and they become more gross and gory.
When he finally turns into Brundlefly, it does not disappoint. It's just as nasty and gnarly as you think it's going to be, and still holds up to this day. It still looks nasty.
Man. I've shown The Fly to a lot of friends who've never seen it. And I always get excited because it's like, oh, you're going to get fucking grossed out once you see this movie. It's probably one of the grossest horror movies in existence. It's almost gag-worthy at times. It's so fucking nasty.
Yeah.
But it's hard to look away from because the makeup is such an achievement.
Yeah.
Such a great achievement that they did with all that makeup.
And there's one scene that I wish I could see. It was cut from the film. It's where he's still experimenting with the transporter. Two animals get melded together, like a baboon and a rat, I think.
I read about that, but they thought it would disturb audiences too much.
Yeah, I guess they played it for a test audience, and they said no, that took them so far out of the movie where they didn't care about the Brundle character anymore. Like he went too far over the edge where they didn't care about him after that through the rest of the film.
That's true, but do you find it interesting that people have more sensitivity to seeing animals killed on screen than they do people?
Yeah.
You could brutalize people on screen all you want, but the minute you touch a dog or do anything like that, people will walk out of your film like, no, I'm not going to watch this anymore.
Yeah.
Very interesting thing about humans.
And one of the cool things about this movie, too, is it had its real baboons. Mm-hmm. And they feel dangerous while they're on screen, and apparently on set they were fucking dangerous because they're wild animals. You don't tame a baboon very much, you know?
Yeah, but it helps give the film authenticity. It's probably Cronenberg's most mainstream film.
Yeah.
And that's quite saying something because even though the narrative is mainstream in the sense that it's probably easier to follow than something like Videodrome or Naked Lunch, or it might not seem as out there to people as something like Shivers or The Brood.
Yeah.
It's fucking gross. In fact, it's probably grosser than his less mainstream movies, or most sickening than his films that have more of a cult appeal.
Yeah.
Than this one. So it's probably his nastiest film.
And I love this as a remake because the original was more of a comedy, like a campy comedy, and the Brundle fly looks silly, like this big giant fly head, you know.
I honestly think with the original Fly, I think some of the campiness comes from it being slightly dated, but I think it's done as a serious story, kind of, and I love the plot line of it and the way it plays out. I'm actually a really big fan. That's actually I don't know why. A lot of films that my grandpa showed me as a child keep coming up in this podcast. The original Fly with Vincent Price, where the iconic help me. That's something I saw as a kid. I actually saw the original Fly and the remake of The Fly within a very, really close to each other as a kid. I remember I watched the original with my grandpa. Then I went to my dad's house and told him about it and said, oh, we're going to show you the remake. So I got to see both of them right around the same time, and I was a big fan of both of them, though I do prefer Cronenberg's version.
Yeah. Well, the actors in the original didn't even take it seriously. Like the help me scene, it took them quite a few takes to do because they couldn't stop laughing.
Shut up.
Can you blame them? I mean, it's kind of a silly concept, but I do like the original The Fly, and I love Vincent Price in it as well.
Yeah, and that original was from 1958.
But the difference is in the original Fly, they just take a regular man and then put a fly head on top of it, just make it bigger, so it looks kind of goofy, like a man with a fly head.
Yeah.
The remake, Cronenberg's version, is more effective because you start to see that you could tell that it's a fusion.
Yeah.
It's a hybrid, and the storyline is actually quite a bit different from the original The Fly, because David Cronenberg doesn't like the original, and he wanted to do it and refashion it for his own purposes, his obsessions like body horror and his obsession with diseases eating the body from the inside out, almost as a metaphor for cancer. At the time, a lot of people took it as a metaphor for AIDS, the way that it deteriorates your body very slowly, watching someone just crumble away.
And that came as a surprise to Cronenberg. He said, I took it as more of a generalized disease, yeah. Because
of the era, I think it was inevitable that people were going to draw the comparisons, given that it came out right when the AIDS scare was coming out.
And it's also had a very effective love story.
Yeah, really good. Geena Davis.
Brundle and Geena Davis. The now famous line, "Be afraid, be very afraid," comes from Geena Davis's line. And Cronenberg says it comes from Mel Brooks.
From Mel Brooks?
Yeah, I guess he was just discussing the movie with him. And he said, what would be the motivation for any actors that were around this Brundle fly? He said, be afraid, be very afraid.
That's a very iconic line from this movie, but I don't think most people know that it actually comes from The Fly, because when I've shown it to people, everybody laughs at that part, because I have to admit, the delivery of it, don't get me wrong, Geena Davis is fantastic in this movie,
yeah,
but her delivery of that line is a little corny, and every time I show it to people, they start giggling. I was like, that's actually where it came from. It's from this movie.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that a lot of people just think it's just a catchphrase that came out of nowhere.
And even though this is a serious movie, it does have some darkly comedic elements to it, especially with Jeff Goldblum. Anytime Jeff Goldblum's in something, you're going to get a little bit of a chuckle, even if he's being serious. There's
I
something
love
about
him as Dr. Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
The best character in that movie.
He's so entertaining.
My number 5 film is Bram Stoker's Dracula by
Nice.
Francis Ford Coppola. I actually rewatched this very recently, and for me, it's just I love the Dracula story. I think that's the best of the classic monsters. It's the one that's the most beautiful, the one that's most, in a strange way, relatable or human, and it has the coolest villain at its center. This is just a lush reimagining of the Dracula legend, and it's more faithful to the novel than a lot of the movie versions are, even though it adds the love story element to it that's not from the original one. I think it's just a very lush, almost hallucinatory production, the way that it's filmed, the way that it's made. You could kind of tell that this comes from the same director of Apocalypse Now, and it was one of his dream projects, and I think everybody, except for one performance, does absolutely fantastic, and I think Gary Oldman did a good job of reinterpreting Dracula, because up until that point you either have like the Bela Lugosi Norwegian accent, kind of I want to suck your blood, that version, or if you didn't, you did it more Nosferatu-ish, which is its own version, which is a little bit more feral and animal-like. This one is suave, but it doesn't recall Bela Lugosi's performance. And it's not like either Max Schreck's version of Nosferatu or Klaus Kinski's version of Nosferatu. This one is more satanic, more demonic. That's what I love about the portrayal of the vampires in this movie. They seem like demons. They don't feel like typical vampires.
Yeah.
They're portrayed as truly hellish creatures that come from Satan. Lucy. Oh man, when she becomes a vampire, she's one of the scariest things in the movie.
Yeah.
And Anthony Hopkins is just badass as Van Helsing. He's blunt the way that he acts.
Yeah.
And the things that he says, like when Mina Harker is asking about Lucy, is she okay? Did she find peace? And he's like, yes, how? Well, we cut off her head and ran a stake through her heart and she found peace. And the way that he said it is really funny. He's great in it. Gary Oldman does a great reinterpretation of that character and puts his own spin on it. And I love the red robe that they give him, that long flowing red robe. They give him a completely new look. And one of the other interesting things that I like about this is that oftentimes in Dracula movies, you only see his shadow because you don't see him in a mirror. You can only see his shadow approaching you.
Yeah.
What I like about this one is that he seems, and this adds to the demonic element of it, his shadow seems like it's catching up with him at some times, like it's independent of him. Where when he's first introduced, you see him, you see a shadow moving across the hall. When Keanu Reeves, as Jonathan Harker first enters, you see a shadow creepily moving across the wall, and the camera pans and reveals Gary Oldman already standing there, and the shadow is still moving, and then it comes up behind to match his movements. That happens with a lot of the vampires, where the shadows seem to exist independent of everything else. And I really loved Winona Ryder as Mina, as the love interest. I love the cinematography of it. I love the style of it. I love the portrayal of vampires. I love the romantic element of it. And I like that it incorporates different elements of the Dracula mythology into it. It refers to Dracula as Nosferatu, and the original Nosferatu was made and called Nosferatu because they couldn't get the rights to Dracula, so it's kind of an illegal adaptation that Bram Stoker's wife was really furious and pissed with. Yeah. So this one pays homage to the Nosferatu element, to the movie Vampire, which is a German film from Carl Theodor Dreyer. The book that they read on vampires, the font of that book that says vampire is straight out of that 1930s film. It uses the same font, and it pays homage to the original Dracula, which is Vlad the Impaler, who was a real person. Yeah. And he was actually used to drink the blood of his enemies, like literally, and that's where the Dracula legend came from. He was an awful person. His castle, he fought in the Christian Crusades. He had a really big castle. As a warning to stay away from his castle, he used to put people on sticks outside, and people said it smelled awful. And he was notoriously cruel. And one time, one of his servants said, it stinks really badly down here. So he actually put him on a stick and killed him and put him up there and told him, well, it doesn't stink so bad anymore, does it? So that's where the Dracula legend comes in. In this version, that's supposed to be Vlad the Impaler, which they never quite acknowledge. So it actually mixes a lot of different Dracula mythology together to deliver a version that's not quite like any other version of Dracula.
So that's probably why Dracula has so many different looks. Like the warrior in the armor, the robe.
The robe with that fucked up forehead.
And then the sophisticated suit with the top hat and the glasses.
The suave gentleman.
The kind of monstrous.
He can become almost anything that's almost evil or associated with darkness, where for a while you think it's a werewolf. Anything like just different beasts of the nights, whether it's rats or wolves or anything that could actually command them and appear as smoke, as mist, as vapor. And all of it gives it a more like I said earlier, more demonic supernatural edge than most Draculas have. So my number 5 is Francis Ford Coppola's magnificent Dracula adaptation, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
My number 4 is another Carpenter film, The Thing, 1982. And this is actually John Carpenter's personal favorite film of his. I was surprised to find out this was written by Bill Lancaster, who had only written Bad News Bears.
Really?
If that's all he had written, how did they know he could write The Thing?
The Thing does have a good, solid science fiction script, but I think most of its effectiveness comes through the filmmaking, the intensity of it, the cinematography, Carpenter's direction and use of the widescreen, Ennio Morricone, who's my favorite composer of all time, his music, and the makeup. We cannot forget the makeup behind this film.
And Morricone's score was actually nominated for a Razzie for being horrible at the time.
How fucking bullshit is that? That is just complete nonsense.
It is kind of toned down from what we were used to from Carpenter at the time. It lets the other elements of the movie kind of take over in it, and it kind of enhances those elements rather than being overbearing.
Yeah, it's John Carpenter usually does the scores for his own films, and it's one of the things that's most notorious about his films is his scores, like the magnificent score for Halloween. But it's Ennio Morricone. Worked with Sergio Leone. He did the score for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is probably my favorite original score ever composed for a film. That guy's a legend. How do you pass up the opportunity to have him score your film?
The original was The Thing from Another World in 1951. So the only thing that's similar to this is the way the opening title sequence is done.
There's other things that are kind of similar to it. The way that they put out all the poles to guide themselves to the restroom, that's from the original The Thing. And I think it was kind of hinted at that John Carpenter always wanted to do a version of this movie because in Halloween, you see Lindsay Wallace watching The Thing on television. And Lindsay and Tommy Doyle watching The Thing on television.
I heard it's a tradition in Antarctica. Everyone gets together and watches The Thing.
Why? To scare the shit out of people?
All the guys that work in those posts up there. Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, Keith David were all excellent. It's a great ensemble cast. It had a $15 million budget, and it only made $19 million worldwide. And this is the one, it's not only Carpenter's favorite film, it's his biggest disappointment.
For me, it's up there with Halloween, with one of John Carpenter's very best achievements. I still have a preference for Halloween, though I could see why some people might prefer The Thing to it, because it is so visceral and it grabs you by the throat once it gets going. And it has some of the best makeup I've ever seen in any horror movie, period. The things that they do in this movie. Oh, Rob Bottin did the makeup for this.
Yeah, this really put him on the map and made him a legend. And he actually worked himself to exhaustion. He was diagnosed with exhaustion because he just wouldn't quit. He would stay long nights after everyone else went home. He would just stay and work and work and work.
I think it shows because this makeup is the gore effects, the creatures, the way that it could be a dog that starts to pull apart and you get to see it be like plant-like or it's a human. The way that it stretches the bodies out and the way that it chomps down on people and has them tossing them around like rag dolls. And it has one of the best jump scares. Kurt Russell has everybody tied up and he's holding the hot needle down to everybody's blood sample to see how it reacts to it. Just when you think it's not going to happen, he's saying, I'll get to you last, because you figure that it's going to be this one person as he do, and so you don't expect it. And as he's doing that, he dips the needle in and the blood just jumps up. The first time I saw that, fucking made me jump out of my seat.
A genuine jump scare, not cheap at all. And this was such an achievement from Rob Bottin. He was only 22 years old. Stan Winston actually helped him on some of the effects, and he created the dog, but he didn't want any credit for it because Rob Bottin worked so hard on it that he didn't want to take away from his accomplishment.
It arguably has the best practical effects of any horror movie in history, period.
Yeah, not
I think you
only
could argue
was it revolutionary for the time, you don't see effects like that now. But it looks wet and nasty and strange.
And believable.
Yeah, otherworldly and believable. It seems that because it's all practical, it's grounded in this reality.
My number 4 is from last year, is Luda Guadagnino's wild reimagining of Dario Argento's Suspiria.
Nice.
Some people might consider this as a cheat because of all the remakes on the list that I have, it's probably the one that is most dissimilar to the original film that it's based on. It's more of an homage and a reimagining and a tribute to the original Suspiria and the feeling that it gives you than it is a direct remake. It takes the same basic mythology and pushes it in a completely different direction. It's an extremely artistic movie, but not in any way that resembles the original Suspiria, which is one of the most artistic movies, horror movies of all time itself.
Yeah.
So it manages to be very artful without aping anything from it. It only keeps the bare bones storyline and the basic idea of it, but the direction it takes it in is completely different. It's a little bit moodier. It's less of a candy-colored like a hallucination, where I feel the original Suspiria is somewhat of a surrealist movie. This one is a little bit more grounded, and there's more focus on the story, and also more focus on the ballet aspect of it, because it takes place in a haunted German ballet dance academy. The original one just incidentally took place in ballet. The world
surprisingly absent of dancing, the first one.
You see a little bit of practicing here and there, but nothing big. I don't think it's something that particularly interested Dario Argento, but it's one of the centerpieces of the remake. Is the dance sequences, the physicality of it. They look like satanic rituals, and they feel like they're conjuring something evil. The way that they dance, the way that they move, the way that they slam themselves onto the floor, the way that they do things like they contort their shoulder blades back where you almost see it popping out, the way that they jump high, and there's always a lot of loud thuds, the way they smack down on everything.
And dancing is at the center of almost every effective scene in that movie.
Dakota Johnson. Oh man, I'd only known her as being from 50 Shades of Grey. I've never seen that movie, so I'm not going to pretend I can judge it, but I can tell you I have no interest in ever watching it in my lifetime.
I tried it one time. I couldn't sit through it.
To see her in this really sold me on Dakota Johnson as an actress. She has such a powerful screen presence in the film. I don't want to spoil the movie, but she undergoes some sort of transformation at the end, where by the end of the movie, you're kind of in awe of her. You find her a little bit frightening and scary. So I really loved her performance. I love the choreography of the movie. I love the muted tones. And I like that there's only one scene that evokes the original Suspiria, is at the end when they start doing the harsh red lights that are a little bit closer to the look of the original. That's the only scene that reminds me of the original Suspiria. And I have to thank Luca for not doing remaking the opening scene of Suspiria, because it's one of the trippiest things I've ever seen filmed. Just the opening of the original Suspiria is so jarring and so hallucinatory and so magical and so violent and pretty and just strange and so heightened. You could never hope to recreate that scene.
No, trying to copy that would not work.
It would have been a complete failure. So it doesn't even ape any of the kill scenes from the original, like the barbed wire or any of that. And it deletes the slasher elements of it, and it makes it more of an overt witch film.
Yeah.
Where it's not a spoiler, because in the remake, it makes it very clear from up front that what you're watching is a film about witches. In the original, it takes a long time before you realize what's going on. The fact that it's a witch movie is more incidental, more of an excuse for the style. Not only is one of my favorite horror remakes, if not for Hereditary, it would have been my favorite horror film of 2018.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
My number 3 is The Last House on the Left, 2009. You already mentioned it on your list. Mm-hmm. Directed by Dennis Ilatis. And I realized that he went on to direct another movie that I love that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Plus One in 2013. It's also called Shadow Walkers. This director actually got this movie from a movie I haven't seen yet called Hardcore from 2004. I guess from the strength of that movie, not only did he get the directing spot, but some of the main actors signed on. I think Tony Goldwyn wasn't going to do it because of the content, but when he seen that this director was signed on and he had seen his movie Hardcore, that made him want to do it. And it was written by Adam Aleka, who wrote The Cell. The other writer was Carl Ellsworth, who wrote Disturbia, Red Eye.
Shia LaBeouf. Red Eye, the Wes Craven one?
Yeah.
Cillian Murphy.
And he's also writing Gremlins 3, which is coming out. I'm personally a huge fan of Tony Goldwyn. Also Monica Potter. Aaron Paul.
She's actually one of the best things about it is Monica Potter.
Sarah Paxton. Garrett Dillahunt was really good in it. It was originally made as a straight-to-video movie, but it was given some test screenings, and it done so positively in the test screenings that they decided to make it a theater release.
I'm kind of surprised because I would have thought because of the success of Alexander Aja's The Hills Have Eyes just 3 years earlier that they would have been faster to just say right away that we're going to release it in theaters because it's another remake. I always thought it seemed like it was banking off the fact that The Hills Have Eyes was such a success that let's remake another one of Wes Craven's 70s hardcore grindhouse films for a modern audience. So I'm actually kind of surprised that they even considered this as a direct-to-DVD or direct-to-video film.
And this is another one that was had some changes from the original, and I love the changes. And it helps make Tony Goldwyn and Monica Potter kind of shine more because of the changes.
It also makes it it separates it from the original where it could stand on its own. That's what the changes do for it. For me, anyway. I think that helps it to stand out more as its own film.
And this is so high on my list because Wes Craven is one of my favorite horror directors. And Last House on the Left is one of my favorite, most visceral horror films. And for this to come along in 2009, and I think it actually tops it.
My number 3 film is a movie we just discussed. John Carpenter's The Thing. Well, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be upset that this isn't the number 1 on both of our lists because I think the general consensus in the horror community is that this movie is the king of horror remakes. At least, do you get that feeling too?
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of the consensus that this is the horror remake of horror remakes, and I get that.
Yeah, people usually say The Thing, The Fly.
The Thing, The Fly.
The great horror remakes.
Both of those, but particularly The Thing, seems to get a lot of love.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's just my other 2, I have to just put it a little bit higher. And the reason it's so high on my list is just because it's one of the most effective pure horror movies I've ever seen. It's the one that's one of the most visceral ones, one of the most shocking ones, and it's one of the ones that's the most fun to show to a group of people who have never seen it before. Yeah. Every time I sit a group of people down, and I love showing people movies. It's one of the things I do all the time. I show people a lot of movies. I always get excited when I sit people down to watch The Thing. I'm like, oh, you're going to be in for a treat right now. Your head's going to be smacked against the wall. You're going to jump, and you're going to be impressed as hell and freaked out by all the makeup and all the gore effects. I'm really big Kurt Russell fan. And the Hateful Eight, Quentin Tarantino's film from 2015, is an homage to John Carpenter's The Thing. And then it might seem strange for some people, but they both are about being isolated in the winter. Yeah. Both being isolated. They're both about a group of people where nobody trusts them. Both of them have Kurt Russell taking charge of the situation. They both have Kurt Russell in lead roles, where in The Thing, Kurt Russell doesn't trust anybody, so he ties them up. In The Hateful Eight, Kurt Russell takes everybody's guns away and keeps them at bay. They both have scores from Ennio Morricone, which I don't think is, like I said, that's not an accident. So they both have that doom beeping score. They both have the scene where they're sticking the poles out so they could guide themselves to the restroom if they have to walk outside. And they're both very graphic and gory. Even though The Hateful Eight is not a horror movie, it is such an obvious Thing homage that if you saw them back to back, you would see just how similar they are. So just had to go off on that little Hateful Eight tangent just because I think it's a little bit interesting that it's a tribute to that. Yeah. But overall, it's just arguably the most visceral horror film ever made. The way that it affects you, the way the jump scares are. And one of the best things is when they try to shock one of the characters back to life, the defibrillator, right when the doctor's about to bring it down, one of the most shocking scenes is the stomach opens up and its teeth, his hands end up inside the stomach and they just bite down on him and just like kind of like tear his hands off. And the way that one character who gets so afraid of the thing, the monster that could shift into anything, it could be any one of them, bites this guy's head and has him swinging around in the air like a rag doll. And it looks kind of fake. But for some reason, despite the fact that the body being swung around like a ragdoll looks a little bit fake, it makes it more horrifying because it looks like that thing is taking a human being and treating them like a doll. The way that it just rips them apart and just shaking all around, that always makes my heart race every time I seen it. I'm like, how can that effect look so cheap but so effective at the same time?
Because it looks fake in a way to where if you seen that being done to a human body, it would kind of look fake. You know
and it would
I mean?
probably disturb you that a human body would be capable of being handled that way, of being shaken up that way.
And it probably would flop around in a similar fashion if something that strong had a hold of it, swinging it around by the head like that.
By the head with its jaws on. And just everything about it is just fucking attention grabbing. And it does have a little bit of buildup before it gets to all the mayhem and all the gore and all the blood. Very tense, very, very typical of the early John Carpenter, of that atmospheric style he has. And I love John Carpenter's use of the widescreen. Yeah. Really cinematic. All his stuff is extremely well shot and well edited. He's a superb filmmaker. Underrated as a filmmaker, actually. He's not just a great horror filmmaker, he's a great filmmaker, period. And this is arguably his greatest achievement, depending on who you ask. And just definitely one of the great horror films of all time.
My number 2 is what you mentioned already, Suspiria 2018. I love this so much. For it to go from when I first heard that Suspiria is being remade, I was completely against it. Like with the candy colors and the surreal aspect of it, and just it's a singular original horror film.
That's
one
like
of the
trying
most
to,
original.
It would be like trying to remake something like Eraserhead or 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
One of those art films that is so singular and so unique and so of a personal vision that you can't imagine anybody ever even thinking that they could touch that. It almost seems foolhardy.
Yeah.
To even attempt to do it. That's what makes this film shocking, because I was a little irritated when I first heard that they were going to remake this movie until I heard who was directing it.
Yeah.
That's what sold me about it, was Luca Guadagnino, who had just done Call Me By Your Name, which is a love story with Timothy Chalamet and Armie Hammer. That movie it's a really great film, but it's nothing about it screams horror. It's very beautiful, very artful film. I found it really interesting that that's the director who chose it, that's that director who was going to direct it. And not only that, he wasn't chosen to do it. This was his decision. This was a dream project for him, because Suspiria is what made him wanted to make movies. So he made this film as an homage to what inspired him to become a filmmaker in the first place. He just wanted to evoke the feeling without ripping it off. And I think that is the most respectful way that you could ever do a remake.
An Academy Award-winning director who comes out
with an Oscar film.
Yeah, comes out with an Oscar-winning film, and that's the next film he wants to do. Okay, let me see what he does with this. And for him to do something so wildly different than the original and still capture the spirit of it, I think that's one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in a remake.
Yes.
I mean, there was no primary colors in this.
No. Very muted and grayish.
Yeah, not only was it not as colorful as original, it didn't even have primary colors. It was very winterish and bleak, where the original one was very wild and colorful. And
there's more of a political backdrop to it, because there was a lot going on in Germany, in Berlin at the time, with regards to the politics and the unrest and the terrorists and a hostage situation. There's a lot of political elements that are running parallel to the story, which the original one does not even tackle anything like that. Just because I think Dario Argento is more interested in the experience and the feeling that it gives you, and kind of capturing you in this this surreal fever dream. This one has more of a story to it. But even though, don't you feel that evokes some of the feeling, despite being so dissimilar? It evokes some of the feeling that you get off of watching the original Suspiria without ever being anything like it.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have like the big music for like from Goblin in the original. This one's a very subdued score from Tom York, who's never done a score before. I think some of the other members of Radiohead have, but not Tom York.
He did a really good job with the score for this movie. Mind you, I'll always prefer the the original score, just because that score is unlike any. It's so out of this world that you can never hope to achieve anything like that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't try to.
Yeah.
So that can't be a knock.
And this is another one that proves that not all remakes are shameless cash grabs.
No, this
was
is a passion project.
And this was a $20 million budget, and it only made $8 million worldwide.
That's sad.
It's very sad, because this movie deserved a lot more than that. And like James said, Dakota Johnson just really shined in this, and she became a major star to me in my eyes. And made me excited to see anything else she done after that. As because the character arc in it is just fascinating. Like you said, she starts out kind of mousy and nervous at the beginning, and then by the end, she's a very formidable
person.
Yeah.
Almost like awe-inspiring. A little frightening, too.
Yeah.
You look at you wouldn't want to fuck with her.
And you can tell that she had 2 years of ballet training to be able to dance like that.
So he must have had... Oh, wait. Did she train 2 years for the movie, or she had 2 years of ballet training?
I believe she trained 2 years for the movie as soon as she found out she was going to do it.
Okay, so Luca Guadagnino was obviously trying to do this for a very, very long time. It's a labor of love, and I think it shows that it's a labor of love.
And I have a feeling she might have started training before he even had it 100% confirmed. And also another thing that you can tell, she got so into her performance, Dakota Johnson, that the film fucked her up to the point of that she needed to go to therapy afterwards. David Gordon Green was originally approached to direct it. I guess Luca Guadagnino actually asked for David Gordon Green, and he approached him to direct it.
Oh, wait, so he was actually just going to, like, produce the project or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that David Gordon Green didn't direct it, because obviously he can do horror really well, but like as we saw with the 2018 version of Halloween.
Yeah.
However, I feel that Luca's style is more of an art film style that's more suited to what Suspiria is that even if you remake Suspiria and make it nothing like it, it has to be kind of an artsy film. If you don't make Suspiria an artistic experience, then why even do it in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not to say that that he doesn't do anything artistic. It's just different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just more of a mainstream style of filmmaking.
And I think it would have been David Gordon Green trying to struggle to reach Luca Guadagnino's vision for it. It wouldn't. I don't think it would have been David Gordon Green's vision.
No,
because Luca was so passionate about getting this going. He would have wanted to make it his own.
He was so in love with the material that he was a better choice for it.
And if David Gordon Green had done it, then Isabel Furman would have been the star instead of Dakota Johnson.
I mean, we might have gotten a good film, but I don't think we would have gotten the standout remake that we got. I'm happier that he ended up doing Halloween instead. I think that was more suited to his style. And he did, he did such a great job on it. It's my favorite since the original. So I'm happy that he went with that horror franchise instead.
Yeah.
The horror property, because I don't consider Suspiria a franchise.
Yeah, and this was definitely Chloe Moretz's best remake, even though she was just in a small scene at the beginning, but it is effective. She's really good in it.
She appears again later on in the movie, but we won't detail too much what her appearance entails.
Yeah.
But she's actually really good. Even though she's only in it for a minimal amount of time, she's really good in her performance, where I was like, oh, really impressive. Better than her Carrie performance.
Yeah. And this is her best, and all the ones she's done is Amityville Horror, The Eye, Let Me In, Dark Shadows, Carrie, and Suspiria. That's a lot of remakes for one young actress.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll stab your eardrums with an ice pick.
So, my number 2 is something that just jumped up on my list very recently because of a rewatch. Is Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, the Vampire.
Cool.
And I love the original one with the F.W. Murnau one with Max Schreck. It's a justifiable classic. It has the feel of... It seems like Max Schreck is a real vampire. There's nothing dated about Max Schreck's makeup or his performance. He's very believable in the role, especially for a film from 1920. And the imagery is really striking. But I feel that Klaus Kinski takes the basics of Max Schreck's performance and elevates it, makes it a little bit more rodent-like, a little bit more feral, and adds a little bit of a tragic humanity to it, where as horrified as you are by Klaus Kinski's take on Nosferatu, you feel a little bit more sorry for him. Like, it's not as demonic. It seems like he's only doing this because he needs to, because he has to. And I love the atmosphere of the movie, the filmmaking of it.
Yeah.
It feels like Werner Herzog went back to 1897 and actually filmed the time. It is so unbelievably authentic that I have a hard time seeing. I was like, this was made in 1979. This really looks like it's from another century, another time. There's an air of authenticity to it, and a lot of the locations are actually where the original Nosferatu was shot. So he wanted to recapture some of the magic of the original, and it just has some of the most striking visuals I've ever seen in any horror movie. It is just absolutely gorgeous to behold. Frame by frame, some of the images seem like paintings. The way that Nosferatu creeps into the room when Jonathan Harker is asleep, and he moves very slowly towards him, and Jonathan Harker looks terrified. There's something a little bit theatrical to it and kind of fake, but it's almost beautiful and really striking the way that he moves towards him, almost exaggerated and expressionistic. And Jonathan Harker's reaction when he's recoiling from him really works for me. And like I said, the cinematography is gorgeous, and there's just such a good take on that story. It takes it for me and elevates what's already a masterpiece, Nosferatu, and elevates it even higher in my view. And another thing that helps elevate the film for me is Isabelle Adjani, who plays Lucy Harker, because if you've seen Possession, you know what a stunning powerhouse actress this woman could be. Yeah. And she is a formidable foe for Nosferatu, where she has almost like a fragile beauty, but there's a dignity to her. There's a sense of every time she's on screen, she carries an air of importance where you know the minute that you see her that she's going to be the one she's the only one who's capable of taking down this vampire. So the version of Van Helsing in this version is kind of lame. He suffers for it. But I think it's a fair trade-off because it makes Lucy the hero instead. Yeah. And it has a much different ending than the original Nosferatu, an ending that I think works better. And while it's not a romance, it has romantic elements because Nosferatu at one point makes it clear that he just wants to be loved because this curse of being a vampire has given him an absence of any warmth or love. And that's the one thing that he craves more than anything else, is just to feel some sort of love in his life. And his performance is almost rat-like. The way that he scampers around, the way that he moves, he feels like an animal infected him and took over his body a little bit. He has very animalistic moves. Yeah. And of course, Klaus Kinski has one of the most interesting faces in the history of movies that really helps with his performance.
Do you know if the changes were Werner Herzog's changes, or were they changes that were more devoted to the original novel?
I think they're Werner Herzog's changes.
Okay.
And Werner Herzog actually had never seen any other version of the Dracula story besides Nosferatu, so it's his only frame of reference. So there's no Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee romantic vampire influence of it. This is just a dirty creature that's almost pitiable. It's not romantic, or even like Gary Oldman's, which is more demonic, but there's something a little bit romanticized about his take on Dracula. This is probably the most pathetic, pitiable version of Dracula, and he's a little bit more terrifying because of it. You wouldn't want to get near him or touch him. He looks like he would suck your blood out.
Yeah.
So overall, I absolutely love this movie. I can't really put into words what it's like because it is very slow paced. So I can see that turning off some horror fans who might be looking for something a little bit more traditional. Mm-hmm. But it has an eeriness that transcends normal terror. I don't know how to describe it. It's an otherworldliness to it. And if you're familiar with the work of Werner Herzog, you know how his movies have almost like an earthy, magical quality to them. Yeah. They seem like they don't even seem like you're watching pieces of cinema, even though every image is beautifully constructed and very well thought out, and the mise-en-scène is very specific and very exacting. It doesn't really occur to you while you're watching it until after you think back on the film and you think of all the beautiful imagery that you saw in it. And overall, I just absolutely love this film. A rewatch a couple weeks ago jumped this film actually up to one of my top 100 movies. And I think it's an absolute masterpiece. Just a great horror film, a great remake, a great telling of the Dracula legend, which is my favorite, like I said earlier, of the old mythological, the old mythical movie monsters. Fantastic. I love everything about this movie from top to bottom. There's not a false note in it. Oh, and another thing I need to talk about is Dracula's castle in it is one of the eeriest pieces of production design I've ever seen in a movie. It feels like you're inside a real house from that era, a real castle, and there's something very ghostly and haunted and eerie about it, that the moment that Jonathan Harker gets in there, you want him to leave. The atmosphere that the film gives off, and the sound design is actually a big contributor to what makes this movie work so well.
Yeah.
So number 2 for me is Nosferatu the Vampire, 1979, Werner Herzog, Klaus Kinski.
So that brings us to our number 1. My number 1 is one that you've already mentioned. Alexander Aja's The Hills Have Eyes, 2006 is my favorite remake.
The Hills Have Eyes?
Yeah, it's another one like Last House on the Left, where it's a Wes Craven classic.
But for me, that one I do prefer that to the original.
Yeah, and I rewatched the original again recently, and I even appreciate it even more than I used to, and it's still not as good as the remake of Hills Have Eyes. It just takes everything you loved about the Wes Craven version and makes it better. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a true remake, because it took the original film and made another film, that felt very much like it, but it's its own film in its brutality and in its realism, I think. And I love Ted Levine in it from Silence of the Lambs. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize his entire part, all his actions and his dialogue were all improvised.
Really?
Yeah, which
I
is
did
very
not know
impressive.
that.
Kathleen Quinlan was awesome in it. Emily DeRavin and Laura Ortiz. She's a friend of Adam Green's, and she was on Holliston with him. And she was also in Victor Crowley. Greg Nicotero and K&B Effects did the effects. Greg Nicotero is actually in it. He's the mutant with the Halo headgear.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I never realized that was Greg Nicotero. But it took K&B Effects 6 months to create the mutants. They took special care in the design and the realism of the mutants, and you can tell.
Other than one character, the original, they weren't very mutant-like. They were just kind of deranged hillbillies.
Yeah.
That's a little bit like that, and I think that makes the remake scarier, is the way that all of the characters look. That you could tell that they're humans, but they look very deformed and really frightening.
It shows you right away when the violence starts that this director is willing to go there. This is going to be intense, and it's only going to get more intense as it goes.
And I think that, like I said earlier, I'm pretty sure High Tension is what convinced people that he was the right person to tackle this material.
Yeah. Because
he has such a vicious, relentless style of filmmaking. It's no holes barred. It's really uncompromising. And his films are not very friendly. They're not the type of horror films that are fun. Well, I haven't seen Crawl. I'm sure that's a little bit different from what I understand. But he has a style that when you watch his movies, it's almost like he says, I'm here to fuck you up.
Yeah.
We're not here to coddle you or to give you a fun little thrill house or to give you delicious thrills or to creep you out. I want to fucking shake you. I'm going to jar you. I'm going to make your senses feel rattled. By the time that this is over, you're going to feel really shaken. So I think he's absolutely perfect to take on such grimy, fucked up material.
And the way he uses the settings in it, he uses this wide open desert and then also this very closed in RV setting. You don't even notice it in the movie, but in order to make the scenes inside the RV more cinematic, they actually made it bigger. So it's like I forget what the scale was, but it's a few feet bigger than the actual RV.
Interesting.
So they can get the right shots and everything. And this is one of the success stories of remakes. This was a $15 million budget, and you can see every bit of it. And it made almost $70 million worldwide. Very well deserved.
I went to go see this as a teenager with a bunch of friends, and it freaked everybody out when we saw it too. I'm actually surprised. It seems bigger budget than $15 million.
Yeah, and I think K&B Effects doesn't charge like, especially back in 2006, they didn't charge like ungodly amounts of money for really highly detailed, very competent effects. And another thing you can see in this movie, it was filmed in the Moroccan desert, and you can really feel that it's 120 degree heat and constant sandstorms. So you could really feel the hardships they went through to film that.
So it was probably filmed under harsher conditions than the original one, I'm guessing.
But I loved everything about this one. That's why it's my number one horror remake, Hills Have Eyes, 2006.
So my number one remake is The Fly.
Okay.
Correct. Yes, David Cronenberg's The Fly. I absolutely love this movie. I loved it more than I let on when you were discussing it
Yeah.
on your top 5. But it's a horror movie that I find, for all of how fucking gross it actually is, and it's really gross, it's nasty, it kind of makes you want to gag a little bit, and some of the extent that David Cronenberg goes to with the body transformation and the way that he starts to almost like devolve and fall apart is a little bit shocking even by today's standards. But what really sells it to me is that I absolutely love Jeff Goldblum as Seth Brundle. His story really broke my heart. I find that for all of the nastiness that goes on, every time I watch that movie, by the end I feel really heartbroken, and I feel that it's a really good metaphor for watching somebody that you love a lot die, or watching them deteriorate in a very unflattering way, the way that cancer sometimes kills people, or the way, especially at the time, like we said, how it was taken as an allegory for AIDS.
Yeah.
I can totally see that, because as gross as it is, it makes you feel the pain of what it must feel like to lose somebody very near and dear to you. Not to just lose them, to watch them just deteriorate from the inside out to a point where they're not even recognizable. And I'm sure that's a feeling that a lot of people can relate to, especially as they get older in life and you start knowing more people that pass on. It really hits hard on an emotional level for me, where every time I see it after, I feel drained. Even though it wasn't written to be a metaphor for AIDS, it's a perfect movie from the era. I feel like the timing couldn't have been better for a film like this. It has a very haunting quality. I think Jeff Goldblum as Seth Brundle just delivers one of my favorite performances in any horror movie, for how endearing he is, how funny he is, and his physical performance as the Fly, his slow deterioration, the way that he moves around, the way that he shakes.
And the deterioration of his behavior, too, makes it more sad because of how he is at the beginning.
Yeah, and you could see him go from somebody that you're cheering on to slowly becoming more selfish, and where you start to dislike him. And then once you realize why he's like this, you start to feel sorry for him, and it becomes pitiable and sad at the end. And the end, when Gina Davis has to shoot him as a giant fly, by that time he just is no longer like a fly-human hybrid. He just looks like a giant fly.
Yeah.
And when he holds the gun up to his head that Gina Davis is holding, and makes her kill him like a mercy killing, almost like euthanizing him in a way, so he doesn't have to suffer or go through this painful process or be this creature anymore, really is endearing. Where I don't know how that movie could be so emotionally affecting to me, with all the nastiness that's going on, with all the gore, with all the gross makeup. And this is up there as with The Thing. I think The Thing might be slightly better, just a little bit more creative in terms of makeup, but this is right up there as an achievement in visual effects and makeup and practical effects. It has the best body horror elements for me in any David Cronenberg film, where I feel like some of his films are a lot stranger. Like The Brood is definitely more offbeat, and it's strange, and it's gross in its own way, and it has gross elements, as Shivers is even weirder.
Yeah.
But this is easily his most nasty and hard to look at movie, where I feel like anybody who watches it now, they're still going to be just as grossed out by it as people in 1986 were. And it's scary, it's crazy to look at. It's beautiful. It's heartbreaking. I love all the performances of it in it. I just love it from top to bottom. I'm a big fan of the original Fly and the remake, and it's one of those movies that actually shaped my love for horror films as a child. Was The Fly. It's one that I always gravitated towards and watched over and over again. Even though as a little kid I was kind of sickened by what I saw, I couldn't turn away from any of it.
And I love monster movies where drama is inserted and real emotion.
So, yeah, that's my number one horror remake of all time is David Cronenberg's radical reinterpretation of The Fly. It just hits everything that I love. I think it's well filmed. For one, it's a really good piece of art. It's just everything I like. It has everything that I look for in a movie in terms of cinematography, acting, emotion. And in horror movies, what I look for in terms of gore effects and makeup. It checks off so many boxes, and it checks off boxes that you don't expect to be checked off in the same movie. I don't go to gore movies to be emotionally affected, and I don't go to emotional dramas to be grossed out. But this one manages to combine both of them without making either one feel inorganic to each other. They feel like they feed off of each other. The horror and the gore is very enhanced by the drama, and the drama in turn is enhanced by the horror of it. So that why for me it makes it almost a perfect film and my favorite David Cronenberg film.
And great actors at their finest.
Yeah,
too.
great actors. Just Gina Davis, really, and I think she kind of gets overshadowed because her character doesn't go through as wild of a transformation. It's not as showy of a performance. But if she wasn't such a strong anchor as you know, the love interest, and if she wasn't so good, it wouldn't work because you kind of see the film, experience it a little bit through her eyes. What it must, like I said earlier, what it must be like to experience the slow deterioration of somebody that you really care for. So without her performance being so emotionally affecting, it wouldn't have worked to the same extent. As good as Jeff Goldblum is, you needed that other performance to make it snap into place.
Yeah, she was the emotional core, and you needed her to feel more for Grundle Fly.
And only it's one of those movies that it's one of my favorite horror films and one of my favorite science fiction films. Like it could be, I could either look at it both as one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made and one of the greatest horror films ever made and one of my favorite dramas.
And one of the best experiment gone wrong movies.
So if you've never seen the remake of The Fly, and I'm sure most of our audience has, but if you haven't, really, please check it out. It's a masterpiece, and for me, one of the greatest films to come out of the 1980s.
So there you go. That was our personal top 10 favorite horror remakes.
We're sorry if your favorite horror remakes didn't make it to the list. And remember, these are just personal rankings from how these films affected us, the type of impact that that they had on us. I don't know if I would say these are the greatest horror remakes, but they're the ones that mean the most to me.
Yeah, when we do lists, they're very personal. They're not like, we determine that these are the best. Everyone come back next week, and you'll hear us discuss It Chapter 2. And we also have a special guest coming in, Hart D. Fisher, the owner of American Horrors.
The channel that our show is on, and also a legendary figure in the horror industry. If you don't know who he is, look him up. You need to check out his series of serial killer comic books that caused quite a stir in the 1990s, so much so that he's been on Sally Jesse Raphael and Larry King, and he was in the 90s became something of an advocate for freedom of speech because the material that he likes to tackle is very challenging, and it's not something that is designed to make society feel comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's something that gets under people's skin. And he also directed The Garbage Man, which is another film that's very harsh, and it's not for everybody's taste, but Hart D. Fisher is one of the most uncompromising people in the horror industry.
So check that out, and we're going to talk about the American Horrors Film Festival, and we're also going to talk about Season 2 of Horror Show coming up on Friday the 13th.
We're going to be talking about the future projects we're going to be working on. We're going to be talking about the channel American Horrors. Yeah. And we're also going to be delving into the very extensive career of Hart D. Fisher because I kind of feel like I didn't do justice to him.
We're going to talk about our Season 2 premiere and everything like that. We're going to try to release this a little early next week like on Thursday or Friday, so you guys can listen to it before the premiere of season 2 next Friday.
So yes, our next podcast will come earlier than Saturday.
All right, and as always, check us out online at Pickles Horror Show at Pickles Horror Show on Instagram and Facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show.
Till next week,
Happy horror.